I've always loved coffee. Not just drinking it but everything about it. The smell of fresh beans, the precise temperature of steamed milk, the art of a perfectly poured latte. When I was 16, I got my first job at a small coffee shop downtown and something just clicked. While my older brother Marcus was playing football and planning his business degree, I was learning about espresso extraction times and customer service. Marcus never understood it. Even back then, he'd pick me up after my shifts and wrinkle his nose. "You smell like burnt coffee," he'd say. "When are you going to get a real job?" I just smiled and kept working. That was 12 years ago. I'm 28 now, and to my family, I'm still just the barista. Marcus became a mid-level marketing manager at a tech company. He makes decent money, drives a nice car, and never lets anyone forget it. My parents beam with pride whenever he talks about his quarterly reviews and his team of 3 people. Me. I still work behind a coffee bar. I show up at 5 a.m., I make drinks, I chat with customers. My clothes smell like espresso beans and I have permanent calluses on my hands from tamping grounds. To my family, I'm the one who never quite lived up to my potential. What they don't know is that I own the shop. And 42 others just like it. The first shop I bought was the one where I started working at 16. By the time I was 21, I'd worked my way up to manager. The owner, Maria, was getting older and wanted to retire. She offered to sell it to me for $180,000. I'd been saving every penny, working 80-hour weeks, learning everything I could about the business. I took out loans, maxed out my credit, and bought it. My family thought I was insane. "You're going into debt for a coffee shop?" Marcus had laughed. "Do you know how many of those fail in the first year?" But it didn't fail. I knew that neighborhood, knew the customers, knew exactly what worked. Within 2 years, I'd paid off the loans and opened a second location. Then a third. I kept my ownership quiet, kept working behind the bar, kept learning. While Marcus was climbing the corporate ladder one rung at a time, I was building an empire, one espresso at a time. By 25, I had 15 locations. By 27, 38. Now at 28, I have 43 coffee shops across the state, with plans to expand nationally. The company is valued at just over $50 million. I have 270 employees, a corporate office downtown, and meetings with investors twice a month. But when I go home for family dinners, I'm still just the barista who couldn't make something of herself. My birthday dinner was at Marcelli's, the Italian place downtown where my family goes for special occasions. It's expensive enough that my parents feel fancy, but not so expensive that they complain about the bill. Marcus had insisted on picking the restaurant this year, probably because his boss occasionally eats there. I arrived straight from work, still in my jeans and the simple black shirt I wear behind the bar. My hair was in a ponytail and I probably smelled like coffee. Marcus was already there in his suit, showing my parents something on his phone. Probably sales figures or team metrics or whatever he uses to remind everyone how successful he is. There she is. Mom said, standing to hug me. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." "Still coming straight from work?" Marcus asked, looking me up and down. "You know they have these things called days off, right?" "I like staying busy," I said, taking my seat. Dad poured me water from the bottle on the table. "How's the coffee shop treating you?" "It's good. Busy season with the weather getting colder." "Still making lattes?" Marcus asked, that familiar condescending smile on his face. He said it loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. "Maybe management one day, huh?" The server arrived before I could respond, which was probably for the best. We ordered. Marcus got the most expensive thing on the menu, making a point to say he'd had it before and it was exceptional, and fell into the usual rhythm of family dinner conversation. Marcus talked about his work. He had 3 people reporting to him now, might be 4 soon. There was talk of a promotion, though there'd been talk of that promotion for 18 months. His boss, Richard, was really impressed with his latest campaign. The company was doing well. Marcus was doing well. Everything was always going well for Marcus. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said. "You've worked so hard." "It's all about strategy," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. "Knowing how to position yourself, how to add value, how to make yourself indispensable. That's what separates the successful people from—" He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Well, from everyone else." "Marcus," Dad said, but without much force behind it. "What?" "I'm just saying there's a difference between a job and a career. Some people are content just clocking in and clocking out, and that's fine, I guess. But if you want to actually build something, you need ambition. I took a sip of water. I have ambition. Sure, but aim higher, you know. You're smart enough. You could do something with your life if you really tried. Get an MBA, work for a real company, climb the ladder. Instead you're... He waved his hand. Making coffee drinks. Someone has to make them, I said calmly. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be you. You're almost 30. Don't you want something more? The server brought our appetizers. I focused on my bruschetta while Marcus continued his lecture about career trajectories and professional development. My parents nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with what I assumed was meant to be encouraging sympathy. This was normal. This was every family dinner, every holiday, every gathering. Marcus was the success story and I was the cautionary tale. The one who took the safe route, the easy route, the route without ambition or vision. They had no idea that I'd built something most people only dream about. They had no idea that while Marcus was in meetings about meetings, I was making decisions that affected nearly 300 people's livelihoods. And I'd never told them. At first it was because I wanted to prove it could work before I said anything. Then it was because I wanted to see how big I could grow it. Now it was almost funny watching them make assumptions while having no idea what my life actually looked like. You know what your problem is? Marcus said, pointing at me with his fork. You're too comfortable. You found something easy and you're just coasting. That's why you'll never have what I have. What do you have? I asked. He blinked. What? What do you have that I should want? Are you serious? A career. A real career with growth potential and prestige, and you manage 3 people and answer to 7 managers above you, I said. You can't make a decision without 4 approval layers. You work 60 hours a week to make someone else rich. So what exactly do you have that I don't? His face flushed. I have a future. I have prospects. I'm building towards something. You're 30 years old making minimum wage. I don't make minimum wage. Whatever you make, it's not a career. It's a job. There's a difference. You're right, I said. There is a difference. Mom reached over and patted my hand. Honey, Marcus is just trying to help. We all just want to see you succeed. I am succeeding. Of course you are, sweetheart, she said in that tone that meant she didn't believe it at all. And we're proud of you. But Marcus has a point about ambition. It's not too late to go back to school, get some real credentials, maybe work your way into management somewhere. Don't you want to have something to show for all these years? I was about to respond when I saw him walk through the door. Richard Morrison, Marcus's boss. Tall, 50s, expensive suit, the kind of confident walk that comes from never having to prove yourself to anyone. He was scanning the restaurant, clearly meeting someone. And then he saw me. His face lit up with recognition. He changed direction, heading straight for our table. Marcus was mid-sentence, something about quarterly projections, when Richard appeared beside us. Emma. Richard said warmly. I thought that was you. I didn't know you came here. Marcus's words died in his throat. He looked between me and his boss, confused. Hi, Richard, I said casually. Just having dinner with my family. This is my brother Marcus. I think you two know each other, and my parents. Of course. Marcus, good to see you outside the office. Richard shook Marcus's hand, but his attention was on me. Emma, I wanted to thank you again for that conversation we had last month. Your insights on the retail coffee market were invaluable. Really helped us refine our positioning strategy. Marcus's face was frozen in a confused smile. You know each other? Know each other? Richard laughed. Emma's one of the smartest business owners I've ever met. I tried to convince her to consult for us full-time, but she's too busy running her empire. He turned back to me. How many locations are you up to now? 43. The table had gone completely silent. My parents were staring. Marcus's mouth was slightly open. 43 as of last week, I confirmed. Opening number 44 in Riverside next month. Incredible, Richard said, shaking his head. You know, Marcus, your sister is exactly the kind of entrepreneur we try to learn from. Built a $50 million company from the ground up, completely bootstrapped before she was 30. That's the kind of vision and execution most people never achieve. Marcus made a sound that might have been words. Anyway, I don't want to interrupt your dinner, Richard continued. But Emma, let's schedule that lunch meeting we talked about. I'd love to pick your brain about expansion strategies. He pulled out his phone. Are you free next Tuesday? I'll have my assistant check my calendar and send you some options, I said. Perfect. Wonderful to see you all. Marcus, see you Monday. Richard nodded to my parents and walked toward his own table. For a long moment nobody moved. The silence was deafening. My mom's fork was suspended halfway to her mouth. Dad was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Marcus looked like he was trying to solve a complicated math problem in his head and failing. You. Marcus started, then stopped. That was my boss. I know. He said. Did he say $50 million? The company's valued at about $52 million actually, but who's counting? But you. Mom's voice was faint. You work at a coffee shop. I own 43 coffee shops, Mom. I also work at them because I like staying connected to the actual business. It's important to understand what's happening on the ground level, not just in a corporate office. You own. Dad couldn't seem to finish sentences. Since when? I bought my first shop 7 years ago. The one where I started working. Maria wanted to retire and I had saved enough for a down payment. Grew from there. Marcus was shaking his head. That's not possible. You never said anything. You never asked, I said simply. You assumed that because I work behind a counter that's all I am. All of you did. But you always said you worked at a coffee shop, Mom protested. I do work at a coffee shop. Several of them. I also own them. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Richard Morrison knows who you are, Marcus said, and he sounded almost dazed. My boss knows who you are. He asked you for business advice. He's asked me several times actually. I consulted on their retail strategy last quarter. Nice guy. The server appeared with our entrees, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated at the table. She set down plates, asked if we needed anything else and left. Nobody touched their food. Why didn't you tell us? Mom asked, and for the first time she didn't sound condescending or pitying. She sounded hurt. I considered my answer carefully. At first I didn't tell you because I wanted to make sure it would actually work. Starting a business is risky and I didn't want to announce something just to fail publicly. Then I didn't tell you because I was busy actually running the business. And then I paused. Then I realized that you'd all decided who I was without ever asking. And I wanted to see how long it would take for you to question your assumptions. That's not fair, Marcus said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. You let us think. I let you think exactly what you wanted to think. I never lied. I told you I worked at coffee shops. I told you I was busy. I told you I liked what I did. You're the ones who decided that meant I was going nowhere. Dad cleared his throat. Sweetheart, we never thought you were going nowhere. Yes, you did. Every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call. Marcus's career, Marcus's promotions, Marcus's ambitions. Me. The barista who couldn't get her life together. The one who needed to aim higher, try harder, be more ambitious. I didn't mean it like that, Marcus said quietly. How did you mean it? He didn't have an answer. Mom had tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. We just wanted you to be happy, to be successful. I'm successful, Mom. I have 43 thriving businesses. I employ 270 people. I'm expanding nationally. I built something from nothing and I did it while you all assumed I was wasting my life. The entrees were getting cold. Nobody was eating. Finally, Dad picked up his fork. Tell us about it, he said. Tell us how you did it. So I did. I told them about buying the first shop, about the loans and the risk and the 80-hour weeks. I told them about learning every aspect of the business, from supply chain management to real estate negotiations to employee retention strategies. I told them about the second location, the third, the decision to develop a consistent brand instead of keeping them all independent. I told them about the corporate office I opened 2 years ago, about my executive team, about the expansion plans. They listened in silence. Marcus's food remained untouched on his plate. By the time I finished, my own dinner was cold. Why did you keep working behind the counter? Mom asked. If you own all of this, why not just manage from an office? Because I never want to forget where I started. The minute I stop understanding what my employees go through every day, the minute I stop knowing my customers personally, that's when I stop being good at this. Besides, I love it. I love making coffee, I love the regularity of opening the shop at 5 a.m., I love seeing the same faces every morning. That's not something to be ashamed of. We never said it was something to be ashamed of, Dad said, but even he didn't sound convinced. You just thought it was something I should move past, I said. Something I should grow out of. A stepping stone to something better, not a foundation to build on. Marcus finally spoke. Richard Morrison asked you for business advice. He did. My boss thinks you're. He trailed off. More successful than you? I offered. He does. Because I am. Not because your success doesn't matter, Marcus, but because you spent so much time comparing our careers that you never actually looked at what mine was. You assumed making coffee was less important than managing a marketing team. Maybe it is to you. But I built something. Something real, something lasting, something that's mine. The server returned, concerned about our untouched food. We assured her everything was fine, just got caught up in conversation. She offered to box things up. We accepted. The drive home was quiet. We'd agreed to postpone birthday cake for another night, nobody having much appetite after that dinner. Mom had hugged me tight in the parking lot, crying a little, apologizing. Dad kept saying he was proud of me, that he'd always been proud, though we both knew that wasn't quite true. Marcus walked me to my car. For once he wasn't wearing his usual confident smirk. I'm an asshole, he said finally. You're my brother. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, he said, echoing my earlier words. I really thought you were just coasting. That you'd given up. I know. Does Richard really ask you for advice? He does. So do a lot of people. Turns out building a multimillion-dollar company from scratch teaches you some things. He nodded slowly. I have 3 people on my team. 3. And I thought that made me something special. It does make you something special. Managing people is hard. But it's not more special than what I do. It's just different. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. For every shitty comment, every time I made you feel small, every assumption I made. I'm really genuinely sorry. I know you are. Are we okay? I thought about it. We will be. Eventually. But Marcus, you need to understand something. You didn't just make me feel small about my work. You made me feel small about my choices, my life, my priorities. And you did it constantly, confidently, like you had all the answers and I had none. That doesn't go away with one apology. He nodded, looking more subdued than I'd ever seen him. I get it. I do. And I'll do better. I promise. I hope so. I drove home to my apartment. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, just a nice 2-bedroom with a view of downtown. I could afford more, could afford much more, but I'd never seen the point. The money from the business goes back into the business, into expansion, into employee benefits and training programs and quality improvements. I pay myself a salary that's comfortable but not excessive. I don't need a sports car or a designer wardrobe to prove my worth. That night I got a text from Marcus. For what it's worth, I looked up your company. The reviews are incredible. Your employees love working for you. And the coffee really is the best in the city. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I texted back, thanks. And Marcus, you're good at your job too. You don't have to be me to be successful. You just have to be you. The next morning I was back at my original location at 5 a.m., opening up, starting the espresso machine, arranging pastries in the case. My store manager, Jennifer, arrived at 5:30. How was the birthday dinner? She asked. Interesting, I said. My brother found out what I actually do for a living. Oh no. How'd that go? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of shocked silence and awkward apologies. She laughed. At least it's out there now. No more pretending to be just a barista. I'm not pretending, I said, pulling a perfect shot of espresso. I am a barista. I'm just also a suit. Both things are true. Fair point. Speaking of which, the contractors called about the Riverside location. They're ahead of schedule. Perfect. Make sure we're ready for the hiring fair next week. I want to be fully staffed before we open. We fell into our morning routine, the familiar rhythm of opening a coffee shop. Customers started arriving at 6 a.m., the usual crowd of early risers and commuters. I made drinks, took orders, chatted with regulars. At 8 a.m. I had a video call with my executive team about the expansion timeline. At 10 a.m. I was back behind the bar. At noon I had lunch with a potential investor. At 2 p.m. I was training a new employee on latte art. This was my life. Not just one thing or the other, but all of it together. The coffee and the business, The early mornings and the board meetings, the calluses on my hands and the corporate strategy sessions. I'd never wanted to choose between loving the work and building an empire. I'd wanted both and I'd found a way to have both. My phone buzzed with an email from Richard Morrison's assistant, confirming our lunch meeting for Tuesday. Below that was a text from Mom asking if we could have birthday cake this weekend, maybe at my place this time. She'd like to see where I live. I smiled and got back to work. There were still 3 hours left in my shift and a line was forming at the counter. The espresso machine needed refilling, someone had spilled cream near the sugar station, and a regular was waiting for his usual order. I was a barista. I was a CEO. I was exactly where I wanted to be. And I made damn good coffee.